So the Mozilla Foundation, the Mozilla Corporation, the company behind the popular Firefox browser, well, I say it's popular, it's got 2% of desktop market share. But Mozilla, the company behind the Firefox browser, just keeps destroying themselves from within, right? These guys, they just don't get it. You know, it's supposed to be free and open source software. And initially, the company was all about being a privacy respecting web browser, which at least for the last several years, they have slowly been getting away from that whole privacy thing. And now they're basically saying that they are going to start collecting users' personal data and selling that data, which obviously, if you're a big proponent of free and open source software, like I am, that's kind of unacceptable. But what makes this especially bad with Firefox is that for the last 20 years, Firefox, you know, they were all about privacy. You read about privacy all over their website. We're the privacy respecting browser. If you use us, you're much more private than if you're using, you know, Internet Explorer back in the day, or now Microsoft Edge, or, you know, whatever, Google Chrome, you know, the proprietary browsers. You know, Firefox being free and open source software and privacy focused, we are a much safer browser for you to use. And then they just did a 180. It's like they pulled the rug right out from under us. You know, and that's more of why people, I think, are a little pissed off about this whole situation with Mozilla. For me, I'm not pissed off about it. I quit using Firefox years ago. I have been complaining about Firefox for a long time. If you guys have been following this channel for a while, I mean, I've got videos going back 5 years ago, how to secure Firefox browser, meaning out of the box, it really isn't secure, even though they claim it to be both security focused and privacy focused. Firefox out of the box has horrible privacy and security settings. I mean, that's the truth. And then Mozilla no longer supports a free internet. This was a little more than 4 years ago. They came out in support of basically censorship on the internet. They supported censoring certain groups of people. In this case, I think they were in support of censoring anybody with any kind of right-wing political ideology. And it's okay to silence those people. You know, you don't need a free internet. You know, you just need an internet with people that think like you. Obviously, again, if you're a supporter of free and open source software, that's not acceptable. That will never be acceptable to the FOSS community. And then, you know, why Firefox is dead, the many mistakes of Mozilla. You know, that was from just 9 months ago, where I list all the mistakes, or at least, you know, some of the biggest ones that Mozilla has made in recent years. And there's several of these things. And it has led to a situation where Firefox right now has a desktop market share of 2%. And what is sad about that is I was a Firefox user since the beginning, the absolute beginning, when Firefox first came out. I was a Netscape user before Firefox existed. You know, Netscape was killed off by Microsoft, you know, the whole monopoly thing, you know, the anti-monopoly lawsuit against Microsoft. But, you know, then Mozilla was created, and, you know, and Firefox was created. And I was a Firefox user on day one because I wanted to support free and open source software, because that's my ideology. That's my political party, free and open source software, right? And Firefox stood for something. And I used Firefox for 20 years until about 3 or 4 years ago. I had to leave them because it just got worse and worse and worse. The product got worse, but also some of the stances, some of these political stances they took didn't make any sense, because they are in stark contrast to the free software movement and the open source software movement. And more than political party or anything else in the world, you know, if you support free software, open source software, that should take precedent to whatever Democrat, Republican, you know, what, if you got a D or R, you know, behind your name or whatever, that shouldn't matter. Not when it comes to free and open source software. And the minute you start talking about, you know, censoring people's free speech on the internet, I've got to move on. And here in the last few months, they've put out statements saying that, you know, Mozilla is not really focused necessarily on making software. They see themselves more as a social activist organization and an advertising agency, essentially, which, okay, well, that's great, but that's not a software project. That's not free and open source software necessarily. If you're worried about promoting a certain political ideology, that has nothing to do with free and open source software. Politics is not free and open source software. And this is something that not enough people talk about within this community, is that It doesn't matter what political party you belong to. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares, and nobody should care when you're within this space, the free and open source software space. Richard Stallman is one of the most liberal, left-leaning people you will ever meet. He has never tried to kick out or censor right-leaning people from his organizations, right? That's not what he's about, because he is from that generation where it was okay. Anybody can be a part of this community. Anybody can voice their opinion within this community, and we don't all have to think alike. We don't all have to be the same as far as conformity, right? We need differing opinions. I mean, that's how this beautiful community and how all of this great software, the reason it exists is because of our differences and how we as a community, even though individually we all have different ideas, how we work together to create these things. So every time I see one of these organizations inject politics, whatever their political ideology is, it's always wrong. It tends to be mostly people that are liberal slash Democrats here in the US, right? They're really the ones that see, the need to inject that political ideology, especially in software projects. And again, that is not what people should be doing. Even if you belong to that political party, even if you support their political ideology and the social activist agenda, hey, that's great. They can have those ideas and they can go be social activists. They just can't do that on free and open source software's time, right? If you're a FOSS project, you should be working on software. You should not be working on social activism. Those are two different things. They have nothing to do with each other. And if you're focused on something that has nothing to do with free and open source software, then why are you there, right? You serve no purpose. In fact, you are just in the way. So the other day I put out a video where I actually went through the definition of free software and open source software. We went and took a look at the GNU.org website, and we looked at the free software definition, the 4 freedoms, right? And then we went to the Open Source Initiative website and we took a look at the 10 criteria to be qualified as open source software. Politics really doesn't play a role. Dividing people in any way is not allowed. Free software and open source software both prohibit you from discriminating against anybody. There's nothing about free software or open source software that allows for division or you separating people into different groups. And the truth is, if I'm being strictly, by the book and being honest with you, and this is something most people are not going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you, if you're a organization, if you're a software organization, specifically an open source software project, and you promote a certain political ideology or you prohibit a certain political ideology, then you are not a free and open source software project. You're a political organization. And there's nothing wrong with that. Being a political organization, I mean, you choose to do what you do, right? If you want to be a political organization, hey, have at it. But do not call yourself a free and open source software project if that's what you want to be. If you want to be a social activist, be a social activist. Just be honest about it. For a project to be free and open source software, it has to be all inclusive. And by its very nature, politics is not inclusive at all, right? Politics is inherently divisive. And politics always changes a group, and always for the worse. In my entire life, every time I've seen a free and open source software organization all of a sudden have any kind of political discourse, it was never good. It never ended well. Ever. And the reasons for this are kind of obvious. The minute you, as the lead of a project, come out and say, hey, I believe in this political ideology, say I'm a left-leaning Democrat, very progressive person, I want to promote social activism, and that's what this project is about. And if you're here, you have to basically agree with every single thing politically that I spout. And if you disagree with anything, I'm going to kick you out. I'm going to ban you. Well, obviously, what kind of environment does that create, right? That doesn't create a good environment. That creates an environment where most people, and in many cases, like the vast majority, like 90% or more of the people in your organization, they can't express themselves in an honest way. They're afraid to. And again, if you're supposed to be a free software project, right? Free as in freedom. The last thing you should be doing is creating an environment where people are afraid to freely express themselves. People are afraid to be who they actually are, right? That's so antithetical to the whole idea of free software that it's sickening when these projects go this direction. One of the things when it comes to free and open source software is there is a certain kind of empathy and compassion that is kind of inherent with the idea of free and open source software, right? You're freely contributing to things, creating things, modifying things, sharing things with the world. You're helping make the world as a whole a better place. You're helping all people, all races, religions, creeds, colors. You're helping everyone, right? You're doing something really quite special. And when you think about it like that, free and open source software is empathy. It is compassion. But if you're one of these people, your default response to anything when people disagree with you is you call them a fascist or a Nazi and you censor them in some way, you ban them. If that's your default response, which many of these people, unfortunately, that is their default response, that's not empathy. That's not compassion. And quite frankly, that's not free and open source software. You no longer get to call yourself a free and open source software project if that's the way you respond to everyone. There was a time, especially of the older crowd, which, I'm a little bit of a boomer. I'm not technically a boomer. I'm in my late 40s. But there was a time when people could be of different political parties and even express those views and nobody got angry. Nobody cared. It wasn't a big deal, right? And I still kind of live in that place. You guys have no idea what political party I belong to. I think a lot of you guys would be surprised if I actually shared it. I should actually share it one day on camera. I have my voter registration card. Half of you guys would be wrong because I get emails and comments and angry comments all the time. Oh, how can you be so right-wing fascist DT? And then sometimes I get emails that, hey, you're so leftist and progressive and your thoughts are so extreme, yada, yada, yada. I get it from both ends. Maybe one day I'll actually share, but probably not. But it's interesting. I have made thousands of videos at this point on YouTube that have been viewed by tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And, most of you guys have no idea my thoughts on specific political issues outside of a few freedom kind of issues. You guys know I support, things like free speech and, freedom of religion, freedom of press, things like that, which are kind of closely tied to the whole idea of free software. But beyond that, like the weird issues that have nothing to do with software, like, hey, DT, what's your thoughts on abortion? Now, you'll never know, right? Because why the hell does that matter? And I've got, all these thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of video out there, and plus the time that I've spent in the community, in forums, chat rooms with you guys, many of you guys watching this video. How many times have I been on a Zoom call or a Jitsi call and things with you guys? How often does politics get brought up? Have I ever asked anybody what political party they belong to or what their political stance was on something that wasn't in any way free and open source software related? That's never happened. I would never do that. I'm not interested. And it's not because, I'm scared to ask people that. It's just, I don't care. I don't care at all. I'm not even a little bit curious. Without me asking, you decided to tell me what political party you belong to. Okay, I still wouldn't care. That still wouldn't affect me at all. That wouldn't affect my opinion of you at all. Because if you're somebody I already knew, I've already conversed a little bit with, somebody I've known for a few weeks, few months, few years, however long it happens to be, then how does you telling me you're a Democrat or a Republican change my view of you? Right? It shouldn't, really, it shouldn't at all. And it's strange that for some people it does. I don't really care what political party you belong to. You shouldn't care what political party I belong to, right? Your political views don't affect my political views and vice versa. For one thing, if you tell me your political views and they're somehow different than mine, okay. Is that going to make me change my views? No, because I have my views and I have my views that I've arrived at through whatever rationality, I've come by those decisions. And the same thing with you and your views, even if they're different than me. If I tell you what my views are, that doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden you're going to change your views on things, right? Because you have your reasons for those. In the end, it doesn't matter. We're in a world now where you guys see what's happening on like our university campuses. And so anytime anybody with any kind of conservative thought speaks on a university somewhere, there are always protests, and typically violent protests. It gets nasty. You see all of these people filled with anger and hate, and in some cases, violence. And they see that as an acceptable behavior in response to ideas they don't agree with. And it is just sad that there are people out in the world that see anger, hate, and violence as an acceptable response to opinions that they disagree with. It's really sad, especially on university campuses. I mean, they should be kids that hopefully are halfway intelligent. That's how they got into university, and they're behaving like idiots. But, that's different. That's the world. Let's talk about free and open source software, because really it's absolutely shameful when anybody within the free and open source software community acts this way, because they should know better. And they do know better, because trust me, these guys, they know what the free software definition is. They know what the open source software definition is. So when they call themselves a free and open source software project, but then they're filled with all of this political divisiveness, within their community, they know they're not really a free and open source software project at that point. They're more interested in this political strife. Any sane and rational person knows that when you inject politics into a project, it's going to cause division. 100% guaranteed. It's never going to cause unity. It is designed by its very nature. Politics is designed to divide. Why are you doing that? Well, typically these people that are these software leads, these project lead devs, a lot of times, there's a lot of very angry and hurt people out in the world, and sometimes they just want other people to hurt too. And they know that when they start doing all of these political shenanigans and mass banning people and shutting down free speech and all of that, they know that that angers people. They know that seriously pisses people off. In some ways, it really hurts people's feelings. And that's what they want. It's like, hey, you know what? I feel anger. I feel hate in my heart. Let me go make sure that somebody else feels worse than me, because if I can piss off somebody else and make them feel worse than me, I can look at them and say, you know what? Maybe my life isn't that bad. Sadly, that is normal kind of human thinking. That's not right thinking, right? That's not something that's not proper thinking. You shouldn't act that way, but many people do. And for those of you that are active in various free and open source software communities and projects and organizations, pay attention to what your organization is doing. Is your organization trying to inject politics into that organization? If it is, you need to shut that down immediately. And if they don't want to listen, and some of them won't, they will actually kick you out and ban you. So be it. At least you stood up for free and open source software, because that's what you should be standing up for. You should be standing up for free and open source software, not a political party. A political party has never done anything for you ever. There has never been anything that either the Democrat Party or the Republican Party has ever done that has changed your life, ever. Never. It's never happened. You can't name one thing. I can name 1,000 different things in my life that are better because of free and open source software. So why do you defend politics more than you defend free and open source software? Think about that. Remember, free and open source software is about freedom. It's about that freedom, that openness, right? If your organization is nothing but 100% conformist discourse, everybody parrots the same talking points, says the same things. Basically, we all agree with this certain ideology, and nothing outside of this ideology can even be discussed. You can't bring it up. If you bring it up, you got to go. If you're in that kind of 100% conformist community, that's not a free and open source software organization. That's a political organization. And at that point, do you really need to be a political organization? The web is nothing but political forums and discussions, all of social media, everywhere you hang out on the internet is filled with nothing but political discussion and division and arguments and confrontations. The entire internet is like that, right? So if the entire internet is like that, why are you trying to be like that as a free and open source software project? As a free and open source software project, you should be trying to make yourself not be like the rest of the internet. That's what you should be doing. The minute you start acting, very political and allowing all this political weird language in your software project, well, you're nothing more than Twitter at that point, right? You're offering nothing unique at all to the world. At that point, really, you're just as fucked up as the rest of the internet. And for most sane and rational people, we just don't have time for that. Anyway, just some of my thoughts on the matter. Peace, guys.